As entrepreneurs and small business owners, our health is super important, especially when growing your business and balancing a family and community service and all the things that we got going on in our lives. But what if everything you thought about healing was incomplete? While modern medicine focuses on symptoms, Christian Elliott argues that three hidden factors, toxins, malnourishment, and mindset, are the key to true healing. But here's the catch. The system isn't designed to address them. So in this episode, we challenge the conventional thinking and explore foundational solutions that no one is talking about until now.
Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show, where you will discover how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream. Paul Guyon, the mastermind behind the Lead Machine, introduces you to trailblazers who inspire you to implement life-changing solutions and systems you can model to nurture your leads and get your offers seen by your ideal clients who will invest in themselves and you. Be sure you visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, tune in and get ready to transform your vision into reality.
Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show. I'm Paul Guyon, your host, lead machine coach, and the founder of the Lead Machine Marketing Group and Mastermind. And I'm dedicated to helping you tackle your tech, master your message, and design your healthy and dream life. So today's guest is Christian Elliott. Thank you for coming, Christian, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Paul. It's great to be here. I'm honored to be on your show.
Yeah, it's an honor. It's my honor. So the three prongs that you were talking about, how did you get started and how did you discover this new way of thinking that might be an ancient way of thinking?
Yeah, well, you're probably right. It is a different way than our culture tends to think about.
Oh, there's my
health.
cat.
Oh, we got a cat. How about that? Yeah, it's probably different than how cats think about it too. But our current culture really just, because we are so steeped in this idea that there is a scientific answer to any problem we have, we tend to look reactionary at our health in particular through the lens of how do I scientifically approach this and translate it into healthcare. That's what do I need to swallow, and narrow that even more to what chemical intervention do I need to swallow in order to attempt to bring about health. And really the short of it is that the pharmaceutical industry makes money by literally poisoning us back to health, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so I had to step back and say, well, because I'm a coach, not a doctor, my angle has always been, how does the body heal and what keeps it from healing, or what burdens the body and how do you help it function more efficiently? And just by focusing on those two lanes, it's become much easier to tease out a more approachable, less complicated, and personalized approach to health and healing.
Yeah. That was a little interruption there with my cat, Phoenix. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So what are the biggest blind spots that people have when it comes to trying to get well?
Well, I think the blind spot, to kind of piggyback on what I just said, is that because I grew up in a culture that reveres typically the term doctor, but more specifically medical doctor, we tend to think of, when I get sick, I go to someone who has a very limited toolkit. They have, a prescription pad, a scalpel, and radiation. At the end of the day, those are the only tools really that conventional medicine has. And if you're trying to use cut, burn, and poison as your way to build health, at some point we have to say, maybe there's a different way to do this. And so a major blind spot is just kind of the expert spell, if you will, that we are under, that somebody else will know my health better than me, and they will have a specialized answer to a very complicated problem. And if I just follow instructions, my health will return. And if that method worked, if pharmaceuticals actually built health, you wouldn't need to refill your prescription. If your body can heal, then we want to look at how to help it heal rather than that part's not working, let's just cut it out. And so it's that's one of the biggest blind spots, is just not having, I guess, awareness or informed consent about what those options are in the medical realm. And then another one is that after people sometimes get wrung out from that system, or they just kind of see the logic of it and think, I'm not sure if that's the approach I want to take. they kind of switch to the alternative world, and it's often kind of the same mindset. It's still find symptom, treat symptom. It's still, instead of a medication, you get a suitcase full of supplements. Instead of a specific physical therapy prescribed exercise, you get a corrective exercise. And we don't look as holistically at the person to say, why are they sick in the first place? And so since we have a culture that reveres tests and science and so on, what we're essentially revering is explanations for how our body is breaking down, not why. And once we can turn our attention to why does the body break down, it really becomes a much simpler puzzle, like you talked about in the introduction there. Now, just find the source of the body burden, eliminate it, and help the body heal. So that's really what I've been about for quite a long time now.
Yeah, and you also mentioned toxins and malnourishment and poisonous thoughts. I think the mind is super important in the whole mix. But can you break those three down for us?
Yeah, happy to. So when it comes to toxins, you can think of it, one of the things we had to step back and say is, what are we trying to detox the body from? And the short answer to that was anything that poisons it. And so the simple examples of things that can poison us are microbes. So any of the, whether it's parasites or mold or bacteria, there's different microbes that in a body that has an ecosystem that is fertile for rot and decay and death and disease, that those microbes can continue to proliferate. You have self-replicating toxins in your body. And then we have all the chemical and industrial man-made sources of harm that cause any number of autoimmune conditions or cancer or diabetes or autism, et cetera, that are dunking up the engine of there's been over 80,000 new to nature molecules made in the last 100+ years. They're just everywhere and we can't get away from them. And then there's natural things like venoms, or there's heavy metals that are natural to the earth, obviously, but have been accumulated in us in such disproportionate exposure that they create a different level of body burden. And so those are kind of the toxins realm, if you will. There's the microbes and chemicals, or sometimes natural, sometimes unnatural. And then when it comes to malnourishment, there's an overlap there because the toxins have found their way into our food, but our farming practices have continued to erode the nutritional bulk of the food. And so there's less and less nutrition per bite, on top of the fact that many of the foods that we now have are more like food-like substances with a long list of ingredients you can't recognize. And we've lost the way nature packaged things. And so it's a double whammy of a problem where we have a toxic burden. At the same time, our food's becoming less nourishing. And then that third lane you talked about was mental toxicity. And that often gets dismissed and overlooked, or not thought of as relevant. And I found sometimes it is the most relevant. And I've just come to make a distinction between a limiting belief and a poisonous belief. And a limiting belief is just, I didn't know that. But a poisonous belief is one that take a shot at your self-image or your worthiness, your adequacy, and whether or not you have what it takes to make a difference. And it's the fears that we develop somewhere, it could be all the way back to childhood, that tell us a particular set of stories that blunt our ability to try, or that keep us playing small because we're afraid of something, or a rule that we have developed a long time ago to protect us from a situation that no longer exists. And we live by that rule in the future. And inevitably, if you're a coach in any avenue of business, health, relationships, whatever, you end up in the mindset realm because you have to address that to get somebody well or whole, or get them the outcome they came for. So those really became the three big things that we noticed have a dramatic impact on the physical body and someone's ability to heal. And so we just made it a point to go upstream and try to address those three things. Are you toxic? Are you malnourished? And are you poisoning yourself with your own thoughts?
Right. And adding on to what you just said, those worrying about your health and looking at your family history. I've lost 3 brothers, both my parents, and both relatively recently. My dad had a heart condition and heart valve and cancer and all kinds of things like that. So you get to the same age they were when they passed on, and you start to worry about what could be possible, which can be a toxic, a poisonous thought for sure. I'll be 67 on Wednesday, March 5th.
That's funny. We have the same birthday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
March 5th. No kidding.
Yeah. Yep.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Same to you.
Well, it'll be April when this airs, but we'll be celebrating happy birthday in a couple of days. So yeah, poisonous thoughts for sure. Those 3 things make sense. What about infections and some of the diseases that are caused but you mentioned microbes and bacteria and viruses.
Yeah.
What do you see the balance there?
Oh man, there's so much I could say about this, but it's a great question. So microbes are never something we are going to be without. There's not going to be an earth where there's no microbes. So part of what where they can become challenging for us is when the ecosystem they exist in becomes very unbalanced. And so if you think of something like heavy metals or parasites or whatever, their food is typically toxic to us. And so the more toxins we have inside us, the more toxins in our soil or in our air or that exist in our microbiome, the more food they have. And so part of the balancing of the ecosystem is to recognize where the food they have comes from. And so if you want to rewind American history, back in the early 1900s, let's just say 1900, the leading causes of death were all infectious diseases. And what slowly happened over the course of the next few decades is we got plumbing and we got sanitation and we got refrigeration. And we started getting rid of filth, essentially. We got rid of unsanitary environments where these microbes had so much to eat, and our exposure to them, in some ways, it can be helpful because you can start to inoculate yourself against them. But on the flip side, if there's a dysbiosis and imbalance of these microbes, or the ecosystems in us or around us are unsanitary or filthy, we are going to be exposed to more and more of them in a way that becomes burdensome. And as we cleaned up the sources of toxicity, we got sanitation cleaned up or more standardized, and we started using refrigeration. We started having a better understanding of cleanliness, if you will. The infectious diseases fell off a cliff and got to about where they are today, roughly in the 1950s. And so recognizing that, if you go back to the Industrial Revolution through today, we have continually made more and more toxins, and we have seen the American's waistline and the American disease burden expand correlated with the increase of toxicity. So they're not separate puzzles, but they're very interrelated. And often we like to point the finger at bad microbes that are floating around, just seeking to devour us or looking for a host they can consume. And it makes more sense to me that the terrain that we live in, the ecosystems of our own body, are more relevant to the healing puzzle. And it's less about, can I avoid breathing in the wrong thing or swallowing the wrong thing? And more about, do I have a base level of health or a low susceptibility to those, such that when my immune system sees them, it just flushes it out and you move on with your day. So that's a kind of a wide angle look at your question there of where do microbes fit in. So they're obviously relevant, but they're not to be feared. And parasites is another big one that's been intentionally dismissed and ignored and is a much bigger problem than most people think. And so often we find that is a root cause that a lot of people just don't know to even look for.
Wow. And it sounds like the arms race.
In some ways.
In some ways. You emphasize the power of the mindset. So science backs this up, and, Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
And As a Man Thinketh, there's lots of evidence, the secret about how the mind can play. And the science of getting rich by Wallace Wattles. I don't know if you've heard of that. He also has the science of getting healthy. I think it's called that. The science of health.
Yeah.
And so, how does that impact our resistance in our immune system?
Another good question. Well done, Paul. So it just like in, let's say, Think and Grow Rich, the idea that your thoughts actually impact your outcome. In health, it's the same thing. We have two terms, the placebo effect and the nocebo effect. Yeah. And both are evidence that the mind literally shapes healing. So in the placebo effect, they try to account for that in what are called the double-blind placebo-controlled studies, where they are recognizing that the healing power of the mind. Because when any group of people starts a trial, they have hope. And hope is really good for the biology. It's really good for empowering the cells to function better because the mind is sending messages of hope and instructions for healing. And that literally changes the body. There's been so many studies that have demonstrated that. Some of my favorite are people that got fake knee surgeries. They've replicated this over multiple times. You give one group a real knee surgery and you give another group a fake knee surgery, they see a scar on their knee. And the people that get the fake knee surgery do just as well as the people who got the surgery. And you do that with things like aloe and poison ivy. Like you flip which hand you put or which arm you put it on, but you tell the people you did the opposite, and they're going to manifest symptoms based on what they think happened. So the mind is fantastic as a tool for healing. But back to our earlier point, it's also a tool for making yourself sick. And that's the nocebo effect. You can literally lower your immune system with your thinking. And once you realize that pessimism and cynicism and a jaded view and a poor self-image and on down that slippery slope really does literally create the biology or the response your cells have to the thoughts you're thinking. So it's highly important, whether we're talking business or relationships or health or whatever, that you understand how much your mind is shaping not just the way you see the world, but literally how your cells are responding.
And as a coach, how do you attack or prescribe or guide people to have different healthy thoughts versus the nocebo kinds of thoughts?
But one of my best tools is just questions. So we have a 6-week emotional mastery course we take people through for one, which is a series of 5 days a week. We're hitting you with a sequential question to help you see and develop a level of self-awareness or others awareness that is palpable and life-changing. And so the best way into that is really, there's a scripture that says, take your thoughts captive and make them obedient. And what I hear in that is two things. It's take them captive. First, you have to have awareness. If you can't capture them, pluck them from your mind and actually look at them and recognize what's there. And captivity, by definition, implies struggle. Nothing signs up for captivity, but to take a thought captive is to recognize it might wrestle with you and not want to come into the sunlight. And the second part is to make it obedient. That says, how do we force this to face a fair analysis and line itself up with truth? And often the easiest way to recognize that is just to examine the stories you tell yourself about yourself or about what just happened or other people or the world. And inevitably, since none of us knows everything, we fill narrative gaps with what we think makes sense to us. But so often we get it wrong, or we make assumptions about stuff, but we can't verify the assumption, yet we tend to reason from it, even though we haven't verified its veracity. So when it comes to examining the stories we tell ourselves, that often is the place as the entry point. I just use questions at that doorway, if you will, into the mind or that person's storytelling, that person's self-image, that person's view of their business, their life, their relationships, whatever, to help them see, if you had to defend that thought in court, could you defend it? Or would you say that same thought to a 5-year-old and think it's a healthy thing to say to them? And questions like that get them to pause and say, actually, no, I can't prove this is what happened. I just think this is what happened. But it cracks open the door for other possibilities to enter the room. And when that happens, what you find is somebody's breathing slows down, they relax, they often cry, they have sometimes it's a cathartic, I need to get this out because I'm frustrated about this. And whatever it is, it's the permission to be safe in a room and permission to be vulnerable and real that often is the fastest path to healing, whatever those storytelling loops are. And so, again, I'll circle back to where I started. The short version is I ask questions to get there and help people identify and find that stuff.
Yeah, and how about the environment that you're in? I mean, not the physical, but the people that are around you. They're telling, oh, you're going to catch cold. You have to, you better bundle up, and all those other things that you hear throughout your childhood. And these are some of the stories that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But there's also the negative Nellies that are in your life that oh, you're working too much, you're not working enough, you need to exercise more. There's all kinds of advice that you get. Do you believe that your I guess you would call it that relational environment is a factor in healing?
Highly relevant, and maybe the most relevant, because if somebody has a raging wound or feeling of loneliness, it's very disarming to any goal you have in life. Doesn't matter what goal it is. So we all need people. It's not an accident. You're not weak for wanting to be around friends, or if you're thinking this way, you're silly for thinking that you don't need anyone or that you don't care what people think. Of course you do. You just want to care what the right people think. And so the reality of having people in your life is super important. And one of my mentors kind of made associations in 3 tiers to help filter how you break up with the toxic people. And so the first is disassociate, is to find people that there's no downside. They need to be cut off because they're not a positive influence. There's limited associations, which is your 2-hour friend becomes a 2-minute friend, or you don't go on vacation with your 2-hour friends. So it's finding what boxes to put people in, and then expand it is where you work to build the relationships that are actually nurturing. And the reality of we become, the average of the top 5 people we hang out with is really true. So yes, your associations and your personal relationships and your ability to navigate them with skill or with empathy go a long way to a healing journey.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned empathy because you can't really just fire your family.
Correct. That's
And
why
those
it's
are most likely
limited sometimes.
those most likely are the ones that are tearing you down.
Can be.
Especially when you're an entrepreneur and I have this great idea. Oh, that'll never work.
All
You'll
right.
never amount to anything.
Yeah.
So, my family, as I said before we started recording, my mother and father met in medical school
Hmm.
in the 40s, and they became medical doctors and they started a small practice. And then my dad got sick. He had rheumatic fever in the World War II, and he developed a heart problem, so a rheumatic heart. And I think he might have also had a malformed valve. So he had to go and he had a valve replacement. And then later on, he had a stroke. And then he got into physical medicine because he still wanted to help people. And both my parents got into physical medicine because they were they were on a mission to heal and help people, like I believe you are. They they dealt with structural injuries and accidents and strokes and head injuries from snowmobile accidents and things like that. How does that physical trauma fit into your model?
It's important to have that as a data point because it's not in your relevant plot point. If I'm going to praise the medical system anywhere, it's in the world of trauma and emergency care. That is what they do really well. And if I get hit by a bus, please take me to one of those. If I fall off a snowmobile and hit my head,
Yeah.
I want to go to somebody who can help me understand with all the fancy testing what's going on, and if need be, intervene and perform a surgery and save my life, because that's excellent. Where medicine tends to lose its efficacy is when it spills over into the treatment of chronic or degenerative type diseases, where they're still using the chemical model to try to facilitate healing. And essentially that's just overriding. It's interrupting and suppressing, accelerating, or replacing a normal bodily function via a chemical intervention. And so that's one of the ways you can start to distinguish it. But for, when it comes to, literal physical deformities or differences in standard biology, where there's room for medicine in there to offer some solutions, and especially in the rehab realm, there can be a lot that can be done. So that's one of the ways I kind of distinguish it. And to credit your parents, there are so many people that get into the medical or health profession because they genuinely care and they want to make a difference. And my story is one where I got into it because I needed to get my own health back. And I think so many people in that world are of that mindset. And whether or not the system trains them to be good little lemmings and stay in a systems mindset, or whether they become independent thinkers and are willing to practice medicine and find things that work and experiment, is a different story. But there's such a mixed bag in any avenue really of what we could broadly call healthcare. And you're not missing something to think, what do we do about the outlier stories? Those are important to think on. And that's what I like about some of the work I do. I get to talk to people across very different disciplines and get them to weigh in on what would be wise here. What does your profession tend to think about when it comes to this scenario, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I have a physical therapist who is working on my back and my knee, and he is. I was so drawn to him because he wanted to talk to me. He asked me questions. He said, and he touched me, and he didn't say, well, in order to fix this, we're going to have to do 16 sessions at $89 a month or a week per session. And, for that, what he did is he gave me exercises that I could take home and then, and do, and I might need to do them forever, but he healed me, or he got me into a place where I could heal myself.
Yeah.
And he was also very interested in the sports medicine, of course, but the mindset of some of his patients, refuse to do the things at home.
Yeah.
And they get upset. He says, well, I've been to three or four different therapists and they haven't helped me. Well, are you doing the exercises? And then and so he makes you do the exercises in front of him, so that he knows that you know how to do them. And so so that you start to own your healing. which
Yeah.
is, I think, at the core of what we're talking about today is you need to own your healing.
Yes.
Own your healing and have an open mind, but also you're going to have to discern what makes sense. So for you,
Yeah,
uh,
I agree.
we you mentioned detox,
Uh-huh.
and I'm a proponent of detox, and I've done a number of them with
Nice.
my wife. With Haley Pomeroy is the detox, the 10-day cleanse is what we do.
Okay, cool.
I don't know if you've heard of
I
her.
have not, but I'm writing it down. I'll look her up.
I would check her out. I highly recommend her. But her daily or her 10-day cleanse is what it's called. And it's a number of supplements and shakes,
Okay.
and proteins. And what you eliminate sugar and water, sugar and not water. You take a lot.
Don't eliminate water.
So lots of water, half your body weight in water, and supplements and these protein shakes, which become meal replacements because you eliminate your food and you eat only prescribed food during this ramp down and ramp up through the 10-day cycle. And so we do this about quarterly. And I'd like to hear about how it is, how you approach it. Detox is a big buzzword, and there are so many solutions that I'm sure that might work. They might not work. They might be just a great way for the proponent of that to make money. I don't know. So some people swear by it. Some people argue that it's dangerous. What's your take on it?
Well, thanks for asking. There's a lot of different things I can say about that or that set of stories, but our view of detox is a little bit longer in the timeline. When we think about getting rid of parasites, for example, that can take at a minimum a month, but often up to 3 months just to get through the egg laying cycle and the next iteration of even the full moon. It's strangely irrelevant in that experience. And then if you have any sort of mold issues, you typically want to get rid of parasites first. If you have heavy metals or plastics or other industrial chemicals, often those are so dangerous to your body that your literally your liver or your connective tissue or your fat cells will just store that, and they'll be stingy with letting it go because they're afraid they're going to poison you if they let it back into the bloodstream to send it to the exit. And so we take a little bit longer timeline to typically go after the microbes first, then we'll go after metals and chemicals. And then we also leverage the power of fasting, which is a dramatically overlooked or underutilized tool where the body's doing the heavy lifting because it doesn't have the energy expensive process of digesting food and processing that and changing metabolic gears frequently. It can just stay in one mode. And I liken it to like taking a toothbrush with, some sort of scrub on it and getting all your tiles. And it's the deep cellular cleaning, the process called autophagy, where your body goes and finds old dead cellular debris or any of the gunk on the seat, if you will, the gum on the seat of your cell, and scrubbing that and getting it off. And it's just a way to facilitate so many fantastic biological processes, from resensitizing your hormonal system to sharpening your brain's cognition speed and rebooting your digestion and so on and so forth. It does so many powerful things. And so we typically think of detox about on an 8-week timeline on the short end, and sometimes longer than that, depending on the person, how far they have to go. And we also allow for life to interrupt. And for if sometimes people have a cleansing response, and if you have one, it's not pleasant, it's not fun, but it's success. You found your body's limits. You found this is about as fast as it can purge what's in you. And so it allows us to step back and say, okay, what would it take to slowly increase our way back to what we're doing and empower your body to make sure the exits are open. There's one of the big detox mistakes I see is that people, they go too fast and they make themselves sick, or they don't do enough they do tidying more than they do deep cleaning. I mean, if you really want to get at the stuff that's been corroding you from the inside for a long time, you want to think on a longer timeline. I just interviewed somebody on my show last week who's 96, and it took him a year to overcome Lyme's disease. And that's a different gear to get in to think, okay, I'm just going to go at this until I'm successful because I know these things work. And then it's a very different headspace to say, what would it take me to be consistent for a year? When you start to think on similar to your point about exercise, you don't graduate from it. It's not like I don't need exercise anymore. You're going to keep doing it because that's the maintenance aspect of you being a steward of your health. But when it comes to detox, there are windows of aggressive. And then there's almost like certain, work rest intervals like you'd have in exercise. You don't just constantly hit your body hard with detox. You give it breaks so that it can recalibrate and strengthen, and then you can go back and do a couple rounds of it if necessary. So that's the high level, I guess, of how we do it. And there's a lot of great purification agents that do nothing to nourish you. And understanding the difference of what purifies the body is different than what nourishes it. And once you get that distinction down, you can have a more measured approach, because some people, they've jumped straight to nutrition without purifying the body first, or they expect the purification agents to nourish them. And there's a more holistic puzzle that we teach people to see.
So let's start with purification. What are some of the ways that you can use to purify your body?
Okay, well, great. So depending on the audience or where you host this, I have to speak in code sometimes. But so water, obviously a big important one, and there's different levels of how wet water is. It sounds funny to think of that water as different levels of wet, but there's different qualities water can have. But some of the most powerful purification agents in the world would be things like chlorine dioxide, which is sold for water purification. The human body is mostly made up out of what? Water. Yeah. There's something like called DMSO, which is dimethyl sulfoxide, which is just an herb from a tree, but it is fantastic at helping the body heal and purify. Another one, structured nanosilver, which is crazy good at crushing any sort of infection that someone may have. And some of these things you can combine. Another one that's kind of pricey, which is really good for heavy metal detox, is something called OSR, which is also sold for water purification. So there's just different regulatory hoops that the things that actually work have to go through, or people that get thrown in jail for actually talking about things that work. So those of us in the health space have to be careful with making sure that we don't slip into the saying something cures, treats, or prevents a disease. We just say this helps the body function better. This is a purification agent. And, you do this at your own risk. But those are some of the most powerful tools. That and parasite cleansing typically that's in the herbal realm. And it's finding, there are some medications, but my bias is always toward anything natural that nature packaged, and finding them in the form and tinctures, the way that retains their medicinal properties of them. So those are some of the best purification agents that I could point people to. And there's a learning curve to figuring out how to use them. And so you're worth the effort to go figure that out, is what I would say. And so part of what we do is we give tutorials. Castor oil is another great one. If people don't know about castor oil, is great at helping the body heal. So that's on my short list there, I guess you'd say. Yeah. And then there's enemas, and there's colonics, and there's detox baths and so on that can be really helpful for purifying the body.
So how do you know that you need a detox?
Well,
or is it everybody need it?
Yeah, so you could just go with the assumption that as of 2006, the average American had at least 700 industrial chemicals in their body. And that's just what we could test for. So who knows what the real number is, and does it really matter? But ways you could know that you are sick or need a detox is you have a health condition. You have excess weight on your body. That's toxins stored in your fat. You're a guy and you can't get it up. You're a female and your cycle is all messed up. Any sort of health that isn't robust health is evidence that your body is under burden. Oh, okay. So that would be one evidence that you're not sick, you're toxic. And to be able to recognize that and go through a cleanse is just, it's like there's a climb, and then you hit a plateau, and you're like, whoa, I do feel better. And sometimes you can optimize from there and you climb and plateau again. But that's really the way you know if your health is not great or you're overweight, you're toxic. And so welcome to, this year, this is where we are in history. And we can be mad at the problem, and we can just do something about it. And so there's so many great ways to heal. But once you identify that, wait, so many different health issues come from one root cause, yeah, you're just toxic. It's not like your body can't heal. Something's keeping it from doing that. And so we've just set our sights on, if we could solve that problem and the nourishment problem, my goodness, do you know how much healing we could possibly do? Never mind, we have, like we talked about earlier, the frame of the mental toxicity that people are in. We had some of the whopper stories. Just last week, I had a family of 3 went through a program. They collectively lost 100 pounds in 3 months. The daughter canceled her surgery she had. She was getting ready to go for a major surgery for her uterus. Nope, canceled. Just because she was able to heal, because she just hadn't bumped into anyone who could teach her how to unburden her body and help it heal. So it's fun work, but it does take a few different clicks in your paradigm. And once that kind of metabolizes, it's much easier to see a way forward.
Can you, I like that you just shared a success story. Can you share a couple of other, or at least one other success story? that
Oh,
you've
sure.
had with someone who's gone through your detox protocol?
Yeah, just last week I had a 77-year-old woman got rid of the cancer on her face. She'd been using what we taught her to do, and her little cancerous spot on her face just fell off. Um, Somebody who's decades of toe fungus did what we told him to do, purified that, and the toenail fell off, and there's a healthy nail growing under it. We had somebody with major uterine problems pass 3 different types of worms in the last few weeks. I had a client who used to weigh over 500 pounds who was on 13 medications and oozing sores and a black toe. The surgeons were ready to cut off his foot, and crippling pain, terrible sleep. And he's in the mid 200s now. He has on no medications, got off psych meds, which are really hard to get off of. And so the body can heal. And if somebody tells you the body can't heal that, that's an opinion. Maybe it can't, but there's a really good chance that person's just speaking out of their own ignorance. They don't know how it could be possible, but they've made the jump to say, because I don't know how it's possible, therefore it couldn't be possible. We see frequently people recover from significant health conditions, not by treating anything. We just say, let's purify the body of things that are in there. Don't know what it is. Only the body would know that anyway. And then let's nourish it back to health. And we expand the definition of nourishment beyond food. It's water, it's sleep, it's hope, it's movement, it's nature. Those are the things that deeply nourish the body and facilitate healing. And so we try to just stack the deck in favor of the things that build health. And it's remarkable what the body will do when it clicks the paradigm that you're going for, and then you just give it time. That's where us coaches make our money. It's walking people through a change journey, making it approachable, helping them manage the ups and downs of but I didn't lose any weight this week, or it's not going as fast as I want, or now I have a headache, or great. That doesn't mean you're off course. That just means there's more to this. You didn't get into that situation in 10 weeks. You're probably not going to get out of it in 10 weeks. There's work to be done. And go back to my 96-year-old example. It took him a year to overcome Lyme's, but he did. Fantastic.
Well, Lyme disease will kill you.
Right. And it's crippling. He was in a world of hurt. Couldn't use his hands.
Yeah.
And his wife had major digestive woes. Gone. So let those stories be an inspiration or a data point that you can say, what? That could heal? Yeah. Those kinds of things heal. But you're not likely to find that perspective in anything with MD attached to it, anything medical attached to it, because they don't make their money on healing. They make it on treating. And they're 2 different paradigms. Healing says the body knows what to do. Let's place our bets on the body being able to fix this. Treatment says the body's making mistakes and doesn't know what it's doing. Let's intervene and change the physiology somehow. And unfortunately, most people in the health realm or the medical realm don't inform you of that. Often they can't even articulate that. But that's really the difference in the 2 paradigms. And with real informed consent, people tend to pick, I'd rather heal. And if I can kind of get out of my own way, I can face some of my demons. I can face my limiting beliefs and poisonous beliefs. And I could find a place from which I could be consistent. Makes a lot more sense. And so those are the kind of people we collect, because they've kind of been through the merry-go-round of the other options, and they're ready just to, what? I have to approach this differently. I don't like my results, so maybe I should change my approach. And that's typically where they find us. And the stories we get to accumulate are fun and remarkable and help me sleep well at night.
Yeah, you mentioned that cycle of health and healing, and exercise and water and nature.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the you must have it? I bet you have a daily ritual, a morning ritual that you use, that you prescribe, or that you suggest people might do. I have a morning ritual.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to center yourself and get grounded. What is your morning ritual, or a common one that you support?
Okay, great question. Yeah, so I'll caveat this with, I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and so they're often less plannable or awake at hours that interrupt my well-laid plans for morning rituals. But my ideal is I wake up, I have water with electrolytes in it. Often that'll have lemon juice as well. I have a kind of a, depending on if I'm cleansing or not, I'll do a detox once, twice a year for myself. So there's a routine of things that I take, tinctures specific for parasites or whatever. And so there's a little bit of just ingesting that first thing with water. There's a patch I use that's phototherapy that I put on my body. But I also, while I'm doing that, I got the coffee pot going, I will, Purity Coffee, mold free, I will there's an app that reads the Bible. And so I play it, it reads me a section of it. So I go through the whole thing in a year. there's a short 8-minute podcast called The Bible Recap that reads me, or just kind of summarizes what I read that day. It's just kind of historical footnotes or theological points and so on. And then it's productive wise, I'll typically commit to my first block in the day is not email. My first block in the day is something productive that moves the needle on my professional ambitions. It's something that keeps me, at the end of the day, I can always look back and say, at least I got that done. And so crowding out the inbox is really other people's agenda. And I want my first fruits of my energy to go to what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that typically is 2 or 3 hours worth of how the morning goes, where I've got my things that support my health. If I'm doing really well, I'll have even what I call my hydrating warm up, where I move my joints in every way they can articulate, which takes me about 7-8 minutes. And then I'll hit the chair and crank in the morning on that number one priority. And then the rest of the world can come at me after that.
I like how you included faith. How important is faith, and whether you believe in a God or the universe or the Great Spirit?
Yeah.
How important is faith in a healing journey?
In some ways, I don't think it could be more important. I think you can only ignore it for so long.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people I end up working with have been, they're in their 60s or they're later in life, and they've got more time to think about cosmic questions, and they know they're not going to live another 100 years. So there's like, this is my golden window, and I don't want to get it wrong. And so they're more apt to think those thoughts. So if you don't think you can just ignore it your whole life, it's going to gnaw at you. So when I say it probably couldn't be something more important, because your worldview is another way of saying, how do you answer the most important questions of human existence, and where we came from, and what happens when we die, and who sets the standards for morals and ethics, and what is the nature of being human? If you don't have reasonably good underpinnings to answer those basic questions, then the world just feels a little like you don't quite fit. You can't figure out what's going on. And to me, grounding myself in faith and truth, and working on the regular to develop a more accurate map of reality, a more fine-tuned understanding of who God is and the human condition, give me so much peace. It's just a way to say, I haven't lost the plot. I recognize that my life is about something more than this, and I exist for a bigger reason. You can probably tell by the mention of the Bible, I come from a Christian perspective. So that's the lens through which I look at the world. And
well, your name is Christian.
Yeah, that helps. It's easier to probably guess that, given my name. Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's fine. That's pretty much what I wanted to say. It couldn't be more important. When we say upstream toxicity, there's 4 angles on that. There's mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And if you have toxicity in the spiritual realm, that can be just a rough, unholy or untrue nature or perspective on the nature of God, or it could be that of yourself. But it could also just be you can't answer comfortably, where did we come from and where do we go when we die? And what is the nature of man, and who does get to decide what's right and wrong? And if you haven't thought very hard about those questions, you can kind of just get by and be like, what's on, I don't know, who's playing, what time do the Cowboys play, or what's on TV, or let's go watch a movie, let's have a pizza, and just keep distracting yourself from it. But those questions crave an answer. And the upstream things that you wrestle with, the mental and emotional things, find their answer in the spiritual realm. And so to me, that's why I don't advertise it, come to a Christian organization, but we don't hide it either. That's part of how we think. And I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. We work with people of all faiths, but that's just it. Yeah, I have a master's of divinity degree as part of my background as well. So I kind of have strangely brought a pastor's heart to this work. It's kind of a health ministry at this point. That's why we set it up as a private membership association, so we can speak freely about some of the purification agents that I mentioned to you earlier that I'm not supposed to talk about, or faith matters that are I don't want to be in those handcuffs. I just want to be able to speak freely. So that's why we set up a PMA, and why I think faith questions deserve a place in this larger conversation about what does it take to be healthy.
Right on. Yeah, and we mentioned earlier about discerning. A lot of people are trapped in the conventional world of healthcare, and they don't really know where to turn. There's the alternative approaches. Some of them try all kinds of different modes that may or may not work, or that sound great, but they really don't hold a promise. I like the fact that you mentioned that the body is meant to heal itself.
It
and
is.
that our world has poisoned our bodies, basically, is what is
Mhm.
what's if I
Yeah.
distill, I'm taking
And our minds.
a dumb guy's approach to saying what you eloquently said. Yeah, we're meant to heal,
Yeah.
and but we can't seem to get out of our own way.
Yeah.
So people are stuck; they're caught. So
Mhm.
what do they do? How do they navigate through that
Through the healthcare system in particular, or just through the broader what?
through the discernment process and say, okay, how do I navigate through these both worlds? I mean, if I have an accident or injury, it makes sense to go to a physical therapist or an occupational therapist or something
Mhm.
like that if you had a stroke. But how do you navigate and discern? Like, well, I've tried everything. I'm on 14 drugs, and I
Right.
and I don't feel any better.
Right. I feel worse, actually. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
what discernment is, sometimes it's only way to get it is a well-earned discernment, but you can save yourself a lot of wrong turns by finding people who do seem to have something to teach and by learning from people who seem to be a deep well. So I had the fortune to find that in a chiropractor back in 2003 who turned my paradigm of health and nutrition and healing upside down and taught me about the medical industrial complex and how pharmaceuticals worked. I'm like, geez, what in the world? But he had so much to teach me. And so part of developing discernment is understanding the methodology of the whatever discipline you are considering engaging. And if you understand the methodology or the history of what became conventional medicine, what you could call Rockefeller medicine, if you know that name, go back to 1910 and the Flexner Report, and we birthed this idea of a scientific, chemical, standardized potion approach to health. But most people don't know that's where it came from. But you can say the same thing about chiropractors or naturopaths or osteopaths or homeopaths. Or there's understanding the methodology. What are they attempting to do for the body? And there's a lot of merit in a lot of things. But what I find is most things masquerade as a comprehensive solution when they're often like 5 or 10% solution. There are some that, if you got a pinched nerve, then or a subluxation of your joints, then there's the literal biology that can't fire very well. And so a chiropractor, osteopath, some Bowen technique, they can help unlock some, even a good massage therapist can do that. So there are some things that are just obvious, but there are many things that, especially when it comes to things you swallow, that will tell you this is all you're missing. You just needed this one mineral. You needed to swallow this one hormone. You needed to do this one thing. And if you do this one thing, all of your dreams will come true. And at the end of the day, they're more in the gimmicky realm, or they're specialists using a particular hammer and everything looks like a nail to them. They actually invented the word partialist to describe what I think is a more accurate frame for specialist. They're looking at a tiny part of the problem, but they're projecting it as a special answer for a specific type of thing. But what specialists do is they intentionally ignore context and they zoom in on a part of the body as if that part operates independent of the whole. And when you don't understand that that's what's happening, it's tough to have discernment. It's tough to know the question to ask. But once you can see that we are never going to package food better than nature, we're never going to make a supplement that is superior to the way nature packages things, and our affinity for taking things apart in isolated nutrients. I seem to be one of only 2 people I know who talk about the need for nutrients to work together. It's not like, hey, everybody stand back, vitamin D is here. I don't need the rest of you. Like, the body needs all the nutrients. It needs all the minerals. And there's no one maverick that's going to come fix everything. And if we can approach that from how would I cover all of my bases with nutrition? How would I make sure that I have the best water I could get, or whatever that is? It becomes much easier to find your way forward, and you start to prune all the superfluous stuff that may have a merit in an optimizing realm. Like red light, great, but is that the source of all the healing? It's what, especially if it's a man-made device. It can help significantly, but to a point. And you could make that case for ozone and hyperbaric oxygen and all sorts of other things that are really cool. But if we do not have the basics down, the rest of that stuff, you can't screw together rotten wood with expensive screws. And a lot of what's in the alternative world is expensive screws. And it does, if the wood, if the lifestyle is rotten, if your diet's rotten, your habits are rotten, it doesn't matter how good the screws are. We've got to work on refurbishing the wood. And once that clicks, it's easier and more likely you'll look in the mirror and be like, geez, I guess I might have to figure out a bedtime. I might have to stop to work on this mindset I have. I might actually have to level up what I eat and not drink so much alcohol and cut the cigarettes. And like, we cannot fight the biological laws of physics, people. And once that clicks and you can make it an approachable lifestyle change, I like to say a healthy lifestyle is not really hard at all. What's difficult is switching from unhealthy to healthy. That's where the challenge is. Once you've made the switch, a lot of my clients have to work out or do things that are much more difficult than I do because I'm not paying back health debt. I'm living a healthy lifestyle that's really relatively easy to maintain as long as I stay disciplined with my habits or have well set and protected boundaries. So anyway, those are some maybe data points to give your listeners some ideas about discernment and ways to think about what they want to engage in, understand the method. If you can just ask a given practitioner, how does this help the body heal? Like, what is it physically doing? And a lot of them just fumble with the answer. But when you can see the logic of it, and you can also see it in its lane, that it is not the only thing you need to do, but there's a collection of things you need to do, and these can help or these can optimize. It gets much easier to create your short list and your own health portfolio, if you will, of what really is going to make the difference for you.
Yeah, and it boils down to, and a lot of people are looking for that pill, that silver bullet, so to speak.
Yes.
That one thing. What is the one thing? Well, there's many things.
Yeah.
But you do have to take control, and you have to own your own health.
Yeah.
And that's what I think a lot of people are stuck with. They said, well, that's too hard.
Yeah. And then the pharmaceutical industry will continue to offer you solutions when all you really want is a pill and you don't want the change. And unfortunately, it's a bummer to say this, humans change for one of two reasons. It's inspiration or desperation. If you are not in motion looking for stories that are data points that say, what, somebody like me overcame something like that and it's possible? If you're not actively seeking inspiring stories, the only reason you're going to change is because you're desperate. And it's much more of an uphill climb to wait until your health is in shambles or your body forces you to do something different because what you were doing no longer can be sustained. Then you'll start to open up to, depending on how bad it gets, I'll do anything at this point. But knowing your options ahead of time and foreseeing that if I had that epiphany at age 27, like if this fast forwards to when I'm 50, what am I going to be looking like? What am I going to feel like? This is not acceptable. I've got to take ownership and do something different. And thank the Lord I had the foresight or wisdom to entertain that frame and say, oh, this is on me. I have to think differently because I don't like my results and where they're going. I need to change my approach. And so if people can do that, you can overcome just about anything, but it does start with your head.
Yeah. So if you don't like your results,
change your approach.
If you like to change if you don't like it, don't keep doing the same thing.
Right. If you're in a hole, stop digging.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't need another medication.
So I've really, we could probably continue talking for quite a while.
Yeah.
But we're getting close to the end of the time here. So what's the best way for people to connect with you and let us know that? And also, what are 3 things that people can do to take today to take the control of their health?
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah. I'd say if you're interested in connecting with me, you can check out our website, healingunited.today. One of the coolest resources I have on that site is a 7-part mini series called Why You Don't Heal, Why You Don't Heal Like You Used to. And that was it will lay out I had somebody send me a video last week. He said, that is stupidly simple. How in the world did I not see that before? It's just a mini series that walks you through where we are, why we don't heal, why your doctor can't figure out what's wrong with you, and what it takes to heal. And it's so refreshingly simple. It's not oversimplified like most of the health world. It's simple. So if somebody wants to see that, they can check it out at our website, healingunited.today, not .com, but .today. We wanted some urgency behind that.
Today.
We're going to let's get going. Why wait? You have one life and one body. Let's do something with it. You can also email me. My private coaching business is True Whole Human. So you can email me, Christian@truewholehuman.com. And then you said 3 things that the listener can take away. Was that my?
Yeah. To take control of their health and start healing.
Yeah, I guess the first one in light of our conversation today would be to take ownership. No one's coming to save you. Nobody is going to manage your health habits for you. The buck stops with you. So unless you're willing to take ownership and make what sometimes are significant choices, some significant, even painful trade-offs of time, money, energy, or emotional capital, if you're not willing to do that, you're going to have a hard time. So take ownership. The other thing I'd say is you can ruthlessly eliminate sources of obvious burden from your food. So if you're eating hydrogenated oils, if you're eating that, vegetable oils would be in that, all that seed oils, sunflower, corn, canola, rapeseed, grapeseed, soy, all that, those, get them out. They're worse for you than sugar. if you can just cut out some of the toxins in your food, and sometimes that means grains because of how they're prepared. They're sprayed with pesticides in order to dry them out, and they make your gut rot. So sometimes just cut out grains and you can feel better. Grains aren't always bad, but historically they were much better. So so that your food is obviously a big source of your medicine, but then just consider going through a cleanse and learn about different purification agents like we talked about. Those are so powerful and are part of what created some of the dramatic stories that I told you earlier, because we just taught people how to take away the body burden and help the body purify in a concentrated amount of time. And sure enough, the body knows exactly what to do when you give it the resources. So those would be my 3 things.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned the food and the things that are in our food that we're not aware of.
Yeah.
Just, looking at the labels, if there's things that you can't pronounce, you
don't eat it.
Don't eat it. My son is in Russia. He moved to Russia a year and 3 days ago, and he had some problems with digestion, and was always having trouble with acid reflux, and he went on a journey. It was his bucket list to go abroad, and he actually fell in love.
Oh, wow.
Along the way with the person who taught him how to speak Russian. But he has only been sick once or twice. Once or twice because of the flu and because it's so cold there.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, you need to cover your neck," and he didn't, and he got sick. But he does not. He rarely has trouble with digestion because the toxins that the way they prepare food is different than the way that we do in the United States.
Yeah,
and
you're right.
That's very telling.
It is. And some of the ingredients that are
and troubling
in other countries, we're like, why are we still allowing this? Everybody else knows it's toxic. But you guys can laugh all the way to the bank, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and also you have a podcast. That's at healingunited.today//podcast, correct?
Correct.
So,
yeah. The podcast is called Deconstructing Conventional. So you can maybe appreciate by now, that's kind of how my mind works. Like, how did we get here? Did we make some wrong turns? And so I just like to take anything that has claimed the title conventional, or that is a typical way we all think, and just say, I wonder if we could rethink this. And so I tend to stay in the lane of health for many things. It started with the idea of deconstructing conventional medicine. And then it just expanded to there's a target-rich environment here for so many different things that we can deconstruct. And so I sometimes just talk about health and freedom and other topics, even faith topics of like, how did this particular type of thinking come to be normal? And can we find a better way? So that's what the podcast is about.
Nice. Very nice. So again, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate this conversation, and I continue to connect. And remember, faith and action go hand in hand. So keep the pedal to the metal. Until next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show, I'm Paul Guyon and Christian Elliott. Thank you so much, my brother.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. You were a great interviewer, and it was an honor to be on your show.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lead Machine Growth Show with Paul Guyon, where we show you how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream so that you can transform your vision into reality. Remember to visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show.